Good morning. My name is Reuven Yeshurun, and I'm a Peter Buck Postdoctoral Fellow in Anthropology at the program in Human Ecology and Archaeobiology. I've been here since August 2012. I'd like to talk today about ancient trash and its implications on human ecology. Modern refuse disposal practices are widely studied because of the remarkable impact they have on wildlife. A good example is the overabundance of mesocarnivores, particularly foxes, in human-modified environments, and you can see an example here of an empirical study. Foxes are opportunistic and generalist feeders that readily exploit human trash remains and animals associated with it. Consequently, fox populations in and around human settlements are denser, the survival rate is much improved, and their foraging territories contract, centering on refuse dumps. Carnivore overabundance can lead to a series of effects on wildlife biodiversity, spread disease, and damage human assets such as livestock and pets. It is interesting to examine this issue with an archaeological perspective, to discern when and how the impact of human settlement refuse started to significantly alter the local mammalian communities. In Near Eastern prehistory, one of the core questions is the transition to Sedentism, the settling down process at the end of the Pleistocene that preceded the transition to farming. Generally, hunter-gatherers who maintain a mobile lifestyle for millions of years started to form small villages from about 15,000 years ago in the Levant. When you settle, you affect the hamlet's surroundings significantly. This is a model suggested some 30 years ago by Eitan Turnov, where micro-mammal communities are altered as a function of their distance from the permanent camp. Commensal populations emerge at the settlement, enjoying an increased supply of food and shelter from predators. Following this, the house mouse was identified in faunal assemblage from these incipient villages. In this model, humans unintentionally affect the local site environment, and they do not benefit from it. However, this was not a one-sided process. Humans indeed exploited the new ecological niche they created. When I look at the zooarchaeological assemblages from these early villages, I find a significant rise in the proportion of foxes relative to earlier camps. This chart shows the proportion of foxes relative to ungulate remains in archaeological sites in Israel and Jordan, a sequence covering the period of 20 to 10,000 years ago. As you can see, foxes become initially more numerous in the early Natufian, some 15,000 years ago, when the first stone-built houses and the fossil remains of the house mouse first appear. They continued to rise in the succeeding late Natufian. Foxes peak in the pre-Portary Neolithic A period, when larger villages employing plant cultivation emerge. Foxes decrease in the pre-Portary Neolithic B period, when domesticates first appear and the animal economy is starting to radically change. They still, however, retain much higher proportions compared to the pre-Natufian periods. This phenomenon is not unique to the Levant. Farther north in southern Turkey, the first sedentary settlement is called Halanchemi. It's dated to about 11,500 BP and has provided us with a huge and well-preserved faunal assemblage. The site had 3 habitation levels, and in each, foxes comprise an important part of the bone assemblage, and the proportion of foxes actually rises during the occupation of the site. So what were all these foxes doing there? When examining the bones under a microscope, many fox bones preserve butchery marks. In this example, in the Natufian site, foxes appear to have been eaten. Their bones are charred in similar frequencies to other animals, and cut marks are found where the major muscle masses would have been, suggesting carcass skinning, dismemberment, and meat removal. In other cases, Halanchemi for example, almost all cut marks probably derived from skinning activities, demonstrating the regular use of foxes for pelts. From all that, a more refined model could be suggested, and simply pictured here. The rise in fox proportions coinciding with the appearance of multiple archaeological markers of sedentism is probably no accident. Early human sedentism altered natural ecosystem in the site's catchment much more significantly than the short-lived camps that had existed before. The habitation refuse in and around the settlements provided predictable anthropogenic food subsidies that caused fox territories to contract and greatly improved fox survival, And of course, this overabundance of foxes and other mesocarnivores is frequently seen today in inhabited areas lacking strict sanitary practices. This phenomenon undoubtedly had significant effects on other animals and plants in the site's catchment area. It also presented an opportunity for inhabitants who could capture foxes in their backyard. Humans started capturing foxes in greater numbers than ever before, utilizing them regularly for pelts and meat. To conclude, I suggest that poor sanitation habits in the first sedentary communities of the Near East, starting about 15,000 years ago, caused overabundance of mesocarnivores, and that once human communities created this problem by leaving out the trash, they quickly learned to take advantage of these unforeseen consequences and to help supply their growing communities. Thank you. The question was whether there were dogs in these early settlements, and can I track any interaction between the foxes and the dogs? There probably were dogs in many of these settlements, because occasionally you find postulated dog burials sometimes in these settlements, 2-3 cases, and you find some gnawing marks on some of the bones, which might have been done by dogs. I can't tell you, and of course commensalism, as we saw here, is known as one of the pathways to domestication. And dogs, we know the end of the story. Dogs were eventually, or wolves were eventually domesticated. So you could ask, what about the foxes? And I don't have a good answer for that, because sometimes it's really clear when, an animal is wild and when it is domesticated, but sometimes there is this pretty big gray area. And I simply can't answer if foxes were a failed experiment in domestication, or they were not domesticated at all, just roaming around the site, or were they used as pets or any other thing. We just need better ecological markers for that. Okay. Thanks.